Hey everyone, it's Austin back again with another video for Human Ideals. I know I haven't posted in over a month and I'm really sorry for that. I've been super busy with tests and just getting used to this first semester at USC. So far it's been going pretty well. Made a lot of new friends, joined lots of new groups on campus. One is the Interfaith Council, where I am planning to introduce human ideals at some point in the future, and I'll talk more about what that experience has been like in this update. Also coming up, I think tomorrow, I don't know when it's going to be, but I am going to be joining the Citizens Climate Lobby for the chapter here at USC, and that's going to be nice because all this stuff that human ideals is about, like systems thinking and spirituality and all these so-called insights, it's very exciting to see how that can be applied on a ground level, like policy, like implementation of policy. Like if you were to go work with, like the LA city council, what would that look like, and if you were to scale that globally, what would that look like? These are all very good questions to contemplate, and hopefully, with human ideals, I can present a viable solution. But anyways, I'm not going to get into that in this video. What I wanted to do here was to give you guys a more in-depth update on my meditation practice. I went into it a little bit for my first video on the spiritual journey I've taken and what inspired me to do human ideals, but for this video specifically, I want to focus on meditation. Okay, so what practices have I been doing lately? Well, for one, I've been really studying up on puredhamma.net's version of Anapanasati. So Anapanasati is basically in traditional Buddhism, it's often interpreted as breath meditation. But the founder of the site, Lal Pinadiwage, at least I hope that's how you pronounce his name. He has quite a different interpretation of not only breath meditation, but also the vast majority of what is being taught as the Buddha's teachings, even in Theravada Buddhism, which is seen as the most authentic, original form of Buddhism. So anyway, so what is Anapanasati? So Anapanasati is, unlike the conventional interpretation of breath meditation, he sees it as the taking in of good thoughts and qualities and discarding bad thoughts and qualities, and that leads to a neurological level character change, and eventually through this practice you start to lose attachments and eventually free yourself of the bonds that bind you to the cycle of rebirth. Anyway, so if you look at the word Anapanasati, you can see that it's divided into two phrases, and although this interpretation has been highly argued and is a bit controversial, even in most Pali discussion forums, the Pali word anapana, he divides it into two words, is ana, which is to take in, then I believe apana is to, ana is to take in, right? So taking in wholesome thoughts, which people usually translate as breathing in, and then pana is to discard, which is not to exhale, but to discard unwholesome thoughts. Now, in yogic circles, they claim that the word anapana is actually coined from the term, the two words prana and apana, which is, I don't know too much about it, but it's something like the circulation of life force energy and like clearing out the chakras, and it is kind of similar in unwiring attachments from the body. But anyways, this practice is a lot more, as Lal describes it, is a lot more contemplative, and you really have to, the key insight from this, the key takeaway from this practice is the use of the tilakkhana. The tilakkhana are basically the three characteristics of Buddhism: anicca, dukkha, and anatta. Now, conventionally, here this is another area where he diverges in his interpretation. It's often seen, anicca is often translated as impermanence. Now, he does admit that that is one component of anicca, but the word itself is a lot deeper than that. It's not only impermanence, it's actually the fact that nothing in this world meaning not only the sensory world, but the world of the 31 realms, the realms that we can't see, which are the human and animal realms, and the realms that we can't see, the heavens and hells and everything in between, right? So everything in this system of 31 realms is every worldly attachment, every worldly transitory thing is inherently worthless. But the essence of anicca is deriving from impermanence. The next step is nothing can be maintained to your liking in the long run. That no matter how much you try, you cannot, things are not in control. So not only is there the definition of like temporal impermanence, like, you enjoy something for a certain amount of time and then eventually it decays. That is one aspect to it, right? Because he presents a logical fallacy. The way he puts it is, okay, sure, things are impermanent, but that's a fact. Buddhism deals not only with ontological like facts, but it's the way we perceive those facts of life. Like, for example, okay, let's say you have a sickness. If the sickness were impermanent, that'd be great. Oh, cool. I've caught a cold and then it goes away in a couple of days. That's great. So, so I guess impermanence isn't so bad at all. But wait, let's say your loved ones, you get to spend time with them in this life and then eventually they pass away. And let's say they get a terminal illness like cancer. No matter how much you try to fight it, if the cards aren't in their favor, they are going to die, and there's nothing you can do about that. So in that sense, impermanence is a bad thing, and that's what he's trying to say. Translating anicca as simply being impermanence, it's missing a lot of things. That you have to get the essence of nothing can be maintained to one's liking. That's the key part in the long run. Now, how about the second word? The second word is dukkha. Dukkha is conventionally translated as suffering, but it's important to understand where this suffering is actually coming from. This suffering is not just like physical, like it's not inherent to life. Well, some of it is. Like, for example, the body undergoes physical pains, and then that's excruciating, and because it's the inevitability of old age, sickness, and death. That's the body is gonna undergo extreme pain, even in sickness. So that's not it. What he's talking about, dukkha, I believe. So he divides it into. Okay, never mind. I'm not gonna go into that because I don't know too much about Pali. But what I'm gonna say that his translation of dukkha is the suffering that is hidden in these 31 realms. Not only the 31 realms. Let's just look at human life for a second. Right, for example, let's say a good example is our attachment to our physical appearance, our looks. We think that building up our appearance, like gaining more muscles for men or for women, looking more attractive, and these expectations are highly culturally enforced. We think that the validation that we receive from these things is worth it, that the gratification we receive, the attention, let's say, what do we get? More money, more sex, or whatever it is that we want to receive. We think that those things are worthy of being indulged in while we still can. It's kind of the philosophy, just live in the present moment, just enjoy it while you still can. Well, wait a second, hold on. Let's say, for example, that you receive validation from your looks. The hidden suffering behind that is that, okay, let's say that you have someone that looks better than you. Let's say whether that's in your workplace, that you have someone that has better looks, better status, he or she grew up with better genetics. Then in that case, what dukkha shows you is that this hidden suffering of feeling insecure, pride and jealousy and resentment, all these things boil up to the surface. But when we're indulging in these transitory things, we don't see it in the heat of the moment. And that's what's meant by dukkha. It's the hidden suffering that's not inherent to life, but is dictated by our perception of life, by our egoic attachments and aversions. And so what's the last? Okay, so we've covered anicca and dukkha. Now the last word, anatta, is pretty deep. He, unlike the conventional interpretation of no self, quote unquote, no self, or not self, however you want to put it, he sees it as, he sees the true meaning of the word as not being no self, but the underlying implication of that is that so-and-so things, these transitory things, these egoic attachments are not fruitful. They're of no intrinsic value. And anatta in and of itself, like I've kind of struggled with his interpretation as well, because it kind of seems like without the definitions of anicca and dukkha, the word in and of itself, like it's not fruitful. Okay, so what? Well, that doesn't really mean much. But the way he frames it is, you have the three words anicca, dukkha, and anatta. They're actually causal, that each word follows up from the other. So because of anicca, because nothing can be maintained to your satisfaction in the long run, there is an underlying hidden suffering to it. Okay, that is dukkha, which is perpetuated by the ego's attachments and aversions. And because of that, because of these two characteristics here, anatta, they are of no intrinsic value. We can say that they may be of some worldly value, but they are of no soteriological value that will bring you lasting happiness. Okay, so anicca, dukkha, anatta. Just the one thing you have to remember is that in and of itself, these words, you can contemplate on them. For example, they're called, the practice of contemplating on each one is it's called sanya in Pali. It's anicca sanya, dukkha sanya, and I'm not sure if it's called anatta sanya, but anyway, if you look on his website, you'll see all the meditation practices under the section bhavana. Bhavana stands for meditation. And so you can look up these definitions. He goes into a lot more depth about it, but basically just remember that these three words have to be used in conjunction to one another. And that's what I've been doing in my meditation practice. Basically, the way he does it is first, the thing about meditation is that with Anapanasati, with his interpretation, is that it's not, just a stationary practice. Yes, like the practice of sitting in meditation for however long you want to sit, 30 minutes to an hour, whatever. That helps to refine your focus and level of contemplation, the depth of your contemplation. In these sessions, you can go deeper into it. You can discover new insights that you might not in activity. But it's in fact, what he says is that it's supposed to be constant. This is, that the practice of satipatthana, satipatthana, don't ask me what the full definition of it is. I am very, very new to Pali, even though I have been, raised in a Buddhist household. I don't know, I'm just telling you the terms that I've come to know so far, learned so far. Under satipatthana, what I do know is that, there's 4 categories of practice, as far as I can remember. 4 categories of practice. Vedana, nupassana. Vedana is sensations, right? So the practice of contemplating sensations, the good and the bad of it, through the tilakkhana, anicca, dukkha, anatta, the 3 characteristics. Chitta nupassana. Chitta nupassana is basically contemplating the mind, the activity of the mind. And then kaya nupassana. Kaya Nupassana is basically the section on postures. It's like posture. It's not, in conventional Theravada, it's often interpreted like the classic stereotype is like, you're walking very slowly on the ground, like, teachers like Daniel Ingram tend to teach this, like, and then you're supposed to contemplate, feel each little transitory sensation, and then through conventional Vipassana, like contemplating 3 characteristics of impermanence, suffering, and no self, like the sort of reductionist version of it. It's like, you're slowly, let's say you have 2 feet, you're slowly stepping, and then you feel every little sensation. Then by somehow seeing the impermanence of those sensations and the unsatisfactoriness of it, the separate self sensation will collapse. And, there are some benefits to that, as I'll explain, but the section on postures, for example, it's like, let's say you're lying down. So the Buddha recommended, I think, 4 postures. Some of them are lying down, standing up, and sitting. I forgot what the last one is. But anyways, what you're supposed to do is contemplate, the fruits, the wholesome and unwholesome consequences of your actions in any posture that you're in. If you're going to lie down, okay, you analyze what's in the sensations you're feeling. You ask yourself whether you should be attached to these things or not. What are the fruits of being attached to the things? What are the fruits of not being attached to those things? You analyze what's happening in your mind as you go from lying to standing up. What kind of thoughts are being generated in your mind? If you're about to say something, if you contemplate, okay, is this thing I'm going to say, will that benefit or harm the person I'm saying it to? Using the Dilakkhana, the anicca, dukkha, and anatta. Okay, so that's basically how the practice of Anapanasati works. So for me, the best way I've been implementing this, mainly the attachment I've been really, really struggling with these past couple of days has been my porn addiction. And I'm saying this because, a goal of human ideals as a whole is to, as I mentioned in my first spiritual vlog, that I want to find, humanity's highest capacity to love beyond physical appearances, that we can look, that if we're forming, interpersonal relationships, whether that be friendships or romantic or familial, that we can care for each other beyond appearances, and then we can value each other for who we really are. And for that, we don't demonize sexuality and sex and nature, but we have to control and hopefully dissolve our lust and our sense of being unfulfilled and being attached to the surface level physical appearance of the other. And for that, you need to contemplate in conventional Theravada. Like for example, celibate renunciant monks are asked to contemplate on the foulness of the body. It's called Asubha Kammatthana, and Asubha means unwholesome or not fruitful, basically. But it's basically how the practice goes is that you contemplate on a decaying corpse, and the rotting of skin and flesh and pus and feces and all these disgusting things, and that's supposed to generate enough aversion for you to detach from it. But then after that, you have to unwire the aversion as well. So like it's kind of, Buddhism is the transcending of, Kenneth Wheeler put it as the transcending of antinomies. I think that's what he called it. David R. Hawkins calls it dualities, where it's attraction and aversion, happiness and sadness, beauty and foulness. So you switch to the opposite end, where that generates disgust in the body, but then you look at the disgust and see that, even that is a projection. That itself is not inherent. It's unreal. And that's sort of the practice that Ajahn Mahabua, the Arhat, the famous Arhat from Thailand, used for his enlightenment. So in one sense, you could say that the conventional Theravada interpretation of the Tilakkhana and Anapanasati and Vipassana, that works, but it's good to introduce this interpretation by Lao as well from Pure Dhamma.net. But anyways, I've been really experimenting with that. Some questions I've asked myself along those lines are, one is, this is one of my favorites, like for example, let's say one day, I am a family person, and I do want to have a family of my own when I grow up. So like, let's say, what I ask myself is, let's say you have a daughter, right? And throughout your teenage years, you've been using pornography and whatnot, but not just porn, but like you've been attracted to by sensuality. You've been caught by sensuality. You try to look past the physical appearances of girls, but then you end up falling for it, and then you blame them for it, which is in some sense, like, there's a lot of debate around whether Buddhism was patriarchal or misogynistic, or whether it was radical for its time. The Buddha did ordain, was the very first, like, Eastern, was the very first religion in general to accept women into the monastic order. So he was revolutionary in his time. But again, it's one thing to be celibate and renunciate and go beyond lust, and it's another thing to generate this residual aversion from it and blame the opposite sex. So you want to go beyond that. But anyways, the question I've been asking to myself is, okay, so you've been unable to overcome lust. You've been unable to overcome lust. When you have a daughter of your own, what type of man is she going to expect in you? Is going to look up to in yourself? And if you didn't have an answer to that question, let's say she was born physically unattractive through some sickness or whatever, or even just bad genetics, there's nothing you can do about that. No amount of plastic surgery or whatnot is going to help. And if from a feminist standpoint, she's going to be falling into this patriarchal system. Even again, I don't like to use that word because I get their perspective, but it does create this blame game. But again, at the same time, I too realize that how these structures have been set in place in rape culture and whatnot. Yeah, I'm really treading on thin ice here, but all I'm saying is that, would you want her to grow up believing that all she's worth is her physical appearance? That sorry, that all she's worth is her physical appearance, and if you didn't overcome lust in yourself, would you be able to live with the fact that, okay, let's say she is born ugly, and then she asks you, Dad, why am I like this? Is my life, can my life amount to nothing more than this? And then you don't have an answer. How would you feel? That's a heavy question. And if you don't overcome this attraction, then like, what answer? At the end of the day, no matter how much you admire her qualities, like, oh, she stands up for her values, she doesn't let anyone walk over her, she values truth and honesty and love and compassion. No matter how good of a character she has, if you're still divided within yourself, if even a little part of you values physical appearances, then at the end of the day, a part of you is still hypocritical, and you're going to have to live with that. So that's been one of the strongest tools for my contemplation. I will say, though, I have been a hypocrite since I did relapse today. So yeah, this is something I'm working on. In terms of like porn blockers, I've been looking into those. So this will be day one for me, and really getting into the practice of Anapanasati, really feeling it on an emotional level rather than just seeing insight, trying to see more insights, some more implications, really feeling it in my bones. so that there is like lasting character change. Yeah, that's gonna take a lot of work, but yeah, I'm gonna have to push through it. Nothing worth having starts easy. I'm gonna have to persevere, but I know I'll make it because I'll have to answer that question. Okay, so from then I'm gonna be moving on to the second, the second method of meditation that I've been practicing recently is L. Ron Gardner's plugged-in presence, which I already mentioned in my last spiritual vlog. I've made a lot of progress with that since then, and throughout this first semester, I've really come to experience, the flow. What Anadi is the flow. Some people call it the river, the river of immortality. It descends from the crown chakra. I think behind the ear. I might get this massively wrong, but if I tilt it down. So basically, it comes from the crown chakra, the descent of energy down through the heart center. One is the heart center on the left, well, to my left, and then it goes down into the heart on the right. What this basically is, to recap, L. Ron Gardner's plugged-in presence is basically designed to draw down, quote unquote, draw down the clear light energy or void energy, vacuum energy of the universe, and then this energy is what dissolves the self-contraction mechanism within what Adida calls the body-mind complex, or basically the experience of our sense of self, the physical and the mental. And to summarize, because I mentioned Adida because he was one of the first few esoteric so-called heart masters that really goes into the mechanics of Amrita Nadi, and this is unlike the method of Anapanasati, where it's mostly about contemplation, and you can see it as a teaching of ascent, using the will to overcome the lower desires. This is a teaching of descent, or grace, the descent of grace into the body so that it may be purified. It's relying on an external source. This has a lot of benefits as well, aside from Anapanasati. Although it doesn't change your existential values, this the energy really gives you a sense, in my experience, a sense of true being, what L. Ron Gardner calls the eternal now, rather than the temporal now, which is passing and transitory. It's felt as an energetic pressure in the heart on the right, called the Hridaya in Buddhism, Hadaya, or Hridaya in Sanskrit, Hridaya. So, I'll give you a quick summary of L. Ron Gardner's meditation practice. All you do is you sit down cross-legged or in a chair or whatever, and like the Buddha instructed in the famous Satipatthana Sutta, what you do is you breathe in. As you're breathing in and breathing out, you feel the entire experience, the physical felt sense of your body as one, unlike, it's fragmented sensations, like one here and one in the feet and whatnot. You feel the entire experience of the body, and you really solidify it. But you don't want to, you don't want to keep your attention like super tense. All it is you feel whole bodily presence. This is what L. Ron Gardner calls it. Okay, and then once you do that, from this felt sense, so from this place of presence, you stare out into the empty space in front of you. And what this does is that it is connecting your presence into the absence, the nothingness of the void of empty space. And what it is that how this works is that if you're sufficiently plugged in or present to what what Gardner calls the divine, present to the divine, the divine reality itself. What is it? What it does is that this empty void becomes the radiant void. It becomes radiant with this unmanifest clear light energy, which Gardner claims is beyond space and time. But there is no official science for this. All we can rely on is the physical felt experience. Jonna Dixon tries to again explain it in her Biology of Kundalini book, but for now I won't get into that. So anyways, from what I felt is that once you feel this radiant energy, the first thing you feel is, like I said, an energetic pressure in the heart on the right. Sorry about that. I think whenever I make videos, I get this really raspy feeling in my throat. I don't know what it is. It's kind of hard to talk. I am new to this, so I guess I'm just gonna get used to it. Anyways, going back. So the first thing is you feel an energetic pressure in the heart on the right. In the heart on the right, but then the next thing you feel, surprisingly, is a pressure. Gardner says that, first you feel a pressure in the third eye. For me, it's not so much. It's more so right around the base of, the crown of the head, not like up here, but like the actual physical top. This energy sort of presses down simultaneously while there's a pressure in the heart on the right. And then this simultaneously, the more present you are to the radiant void in front of you, the stronger this energy becomes. And then, so the next step is then you have to let go of your entire, the resistance you have in your body and your mind. So once you let go of that, this energy is free to flow down the so-called wire or river of Anadi. Anadi, one of the main channels in the body, and then it flows down from the crown chakra, behind the neck, to the front, down into the left heart, the heart on the left, which Adida says is the heart, at the base of our root desires, or our carnal, like lower habitual desires. And then it flows to the right, which is the seat of the place of our sense of self, as Ramana Maharshi first outlined in his books. Like they're on Gardner's recommended reading list, like Sri Ramana Gita. Yeah, I think that's, and talks with Ramana Maharshi, I think. Don't quote me on that because I haven't read them in full detail at all. So, but anyways, if you do want to learn more about Anadi, the heart on the right, the first two authors you should check out really are Ramana Maharshi and Adida Samraj. Again, from Ramana is Sri Ramana Gita, and then from Adida, it's the knee of listening and the method of the siddhas. Yes, that's correct. Yeah, but in terms of this meditation, I would say that it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't change your inner values like Anapanasati does. And even Gardner himself says that that's, changing your values is a lot easier said than done, and a lot of it has to do with your ingrained personality, how you were born with. If you're more idealistic like I am, then you're more inclined to do that, whereas he's more of a realist. People may be less inclined to do that unless it's of personal relevance. But in other issues, like I may be motivating climate change, he isn't, because he's libertarian and right-leaning. But anyways, like even though we have different issues of motivation, like how going beyond sensual, like physical appearances is important to me, nevertheless, contemplation of Anapanasati with the three characteristics does bring about huge character changes, even if these addictions, like for example my porn addiction, are super like, deeply rooted. But this one, however, I do feel that at some point Anapanasati and Anapana and plugged in presence will have to be combined. Right now the issue is I just don't know how to do that. So you have this flow of energy, which temporarily, as long as the energy is flowing, like right now as I'm speaking, I'm using a lot of my solar plexus energy, like I can feel it contracting as I'm speaking, and this creates quite a bit of tension. But there's still a little bit of a light residue of this clear light energy flowing through Amrita Nadi, but nowhere near as strong as when I'm in dedicated meditation or in activity, where I barely notice it. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, so anyways, right now I don't know how to combine Anapana and plugged in presence. I do have a suspicion that what I've been trying to do is first you get to the initial state of plugged in presence where you're connected to the radiant void, have the energy flow through you, but then after that, once you're in that state of expansion or where the body mind is not self-contracted, then you contemplate on the Dilakkhana, Anicca Dukkha Anatta. Once you do that, what I suspect is that because of the non-binding nature that this energy reveals to you, that all these attachments to the senses are, in fact, they're not actually pulling you towards them. Reality itself is non-binding, that the only obstacle is the sense of the separate self. Adida once says that there's no one inside, that the perception of a me looking out at a world of apparently separate entities is an illusion. That's not even solipsism, that's just that we are in one unified reality, what Adida calls reality, as it is always already the case. I really love that phrase. It just cuts through all of the, even he said that conventional spiritual seeking is one big psychodrama, that we're in it for, part of it is that we're so caught up in the separate self, is that we see that, I have to get rid of this attachment, that attachment. No, it's one. One is this, it's the separate self located in the heart on the right, and to unwire that is way easier said than done, because like I said, people have a lot of habitual tendencies. In Buddhism, the defilements are called kilesas, 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 and in Advaita Vedanta circles or Hinduism or yogic circles, it's called vasanas, or Vasanas. Yeah, that's how you spell it. Vasanas, kilesas, and vasanas. For those of you Burmese folks out there, kilesas is gileta, and vasanas is vadana. So, yeah, all of these things have to be unwired. Mr. Gardner has said that, as this process is happening, Ramana has said it as well, Adida has said it as well, describing the esoteric anatomy, what happens is that there's all these multiple channels in the body. They're called nadis, Nadis, and there's about, yoga says there's 72,000 of them, which I'd imagine. I have no idea how they map it. That's truly amazing, because Buddhism doesn't talk about it, but as you become enlightened, David R. Hawkins once said that, it felt like his bones were being crushed in his body. It was excruciatingly painful, and the Buddha and Jesus Christ, felt the same thing as the Kundalini energy. For them, it was the descending process. I'm not sure how much descending energy they actually received. Maybe in Jesus' case, because he talks about the Holy Communion and the Eucharist, which Mr. Gardner has based his plugged in presence meditation off of, which he claims is what Jesus actually taught. They're all different perspectives, but the underlying theme is that there are huge physiological changes that come with enlightenment. My teacher Anadi once said that if someone were to get fully enlightened, to the top level, in 1 second they would die. The body can't handle that, because every attachment that you have, every vasana that you have, corresponds with a quote-unquote clogged up or inefficiently functioning nadi or channel in the body, and those things have to be cleared out with the energy from above, or from the psycho-emotional kundalini energy ascending from the spine. The twin snakes that you often see. symbolically. Either one of these energies has to clear up the Nadi system, and that's painful. I'm nowhere near that level. I mean, I've experienced Amrita Nadi, some pretty strong flows of it into the heart on the right. In sitting meditation, in activity, it's nowhere near as pronounced. I still have to see how I'm going to integrate that, being whole bodily present while I'm walking, while I'm talking, that's while I'm in class. That's funny story. One time I was in my global economy class, and I was listening to the lecture, and because by nature of it, it's really, really information heavy. I obviously zone off like I usually do, and I decided to try this, plugged in presence. And I do have some problems with like social anxiety and self-consciousness and whatnot. So obviously there are residual bits of tension that I have in my body, especially in the solar plexus. Excuse me. Anyway, so I have these like residual tensions in my body, and so I decided to try, a minor version of plugged in presence in the class, like being whole bodily present to the void as I was listening to the lecture. And once I built up just a little bit of energy, I decided to let go, and the clear light energy would flow through Amrita Nadi. I would get a little bit, and surprisingly, Jana Dixon talks about it in her book, Biology of Kundalini. I did experience 2 heart expansions. This is basically a process where the energy flows into the heart on the right. It becomes so strong that the heart chakra, which is on the center, all of a sudden bursts outward just a little bit from the energy bleeding out from the heart on the right, and then you feel this sense of elated joy and love. But then it kind of feels it's not the experience of love that's necessarily overwhelming. It's not like unconditional love, which is something that I would kill to have. Not literally, of course, but it's more of the energetic expansion of that heart chakra, anahata, in Sanskrit terms, whatever you want to call it. It kind of makes it hard to function, especially when you're in a classroom setting. It's like, for me, I had to contain myself from laughing, and so I had to dial down the plugged in presence, because obviously you can't do that while you're listening to a lecture in front of 30 or so people. So nobody noticed, thankfully, but yeah, I've kind of had moments like that. Surprisingly, in sitting meditation, I don't get it, because usually the energy is flowing into the heart on the right. Usually when I'm in sitting meditation, what happens is there's a lot of energetic pressure in the crown. I let go, and then it descends down into Amrita Nadi, the S curve. Goes into the left, and then there's a heavy push into the right. Sometimes when the energy sinks into the heart on the right enough, there's a little bit of an opening where the energy is kind of isolated in a little pocket, and that's kind of the experience you want to aim for. That doesn't happen always. What usually happens is the energy keeps pushing into the right, and it does feel a bit uncomfortable. It's like, L. Ron Gardner calls it the seat. The seat of the self is represented as the knot of self-contraction, the heart knot. And Buddha described enlightenment as the heart released, or the liberation of the separate self contained in that knot. Yeah, so that's what I've been feeling with L. Ron Gardner's plugged in presence. As far as connecting with it with, some other teachers I followed, like Dr. David R. Hawkins. Again, his book Transcending the Levels of Consciousness is amazing. You guys should definitely read that. In terms of, he doesn't go into the biomechanics of enlightenment too much, although he talks about, left brain versus right brain activity, moving from content to context, power versus force, linearity versus non-linearity, all of that. But his book is so good for describing each level of attachment and aversion, what you have to do to overcome these positionalities. I'd say in more depth than Law's Anapanasati, simply because he talks about every stage of emotion, like shame, to guilt, to fear, to anger, to desire, to pride, and then to courage, neutrality, willingness, acceptance, reason, love. Probably not saying this in the right order, but along those lines, he goes into each emotion in so much depth that you can tell, even if he didn't follow the biomechanics of like the descent of energy or whatnot, because L. Ron Gardner, he's like really, he can be a little bit uptight about it, but deservingly, because he did create the method of plugged-in presence, even though he wasn't the first to discover Anadi. What I'm trying to say is that even if teachers don't follow the same path of energy or salvation, whether it be ascending through Kundalini snakes or descending through Anadi, the point is that the way you can tell whether a teacher is enlightened or not is you can read their literature. Mr. Gardner, he wasn't impressed with Dr. David R. Hawkins' work. I am, and that's okay. In terms of each level of consciousness, like for example, he talks about surrendering the positionalities, the attachments and aversions are inherent in desire, and how the lower levels are actually, you're getting a secret validation and juice out of it. With desire, anger, pride, or like for example with anger, it's the desire to, the need to get even with another person or to be right, and you're getting secret validation you're getting from that is admiration. So with Anapanasati, going back to that, you can contemplate, okay, the secret validation that you receive from anger, again, that's the idea of dukkha, is the hidden suffering that we don't see. That is inherently worthless, because let's say with validation, with anicca, you can't maintain it in the long run, that these people will eventually stop supporting you, or they may go off and do their own thing, or they may die, or you can't control their reactions. All that's part of anicca, right? You can use the dilakkhana, and a big insight for me is that one thing that really validates Dr. Hawkins' work is that it's almost a parallel. It's almost the exact same as Lao's interpretation of Anapana meditation. I think he calls it Anapanasati Bhavana, right? So yeah, that's extremely validating for me. Just really goes to show how magnificent of a being that the Buddha really was, the true depth of his teachings. Like the stuff that he shared, that he shared with mankind in the Abhidhamma, like no teacher to date really comes even close. So yeah, I mean, like, what you can see is that all these teachings do converge. They may not converge into the exact same principles or ideals, but the techniques still do go hand in hand in one another. That it may not be, there are benefits to practicing them together, creating your own procedure or style of meditation, rather than, okay, I'm going to practice Anapana in one session, and then I'm going to practice Dr. Hawkins' letting go method, and then I'm going to practice plugged-in presence or whatnot. Yeah, so that's been really interesting. With L. Ron Gardner's plugged-in presence method. I think that's all I have to share with the technique. Oh, one more thing. This is really important. Some tips in being present to the radiant void. One is, I find that you shouldn't focus on the breath too much, because oftentimes when you're breathing, if you're trying to exhale with too much intent, even if it's very, very subtle, you create tensions in the body, and that'll actually make your sense of presence, like, it'll feel like you being present is too forced. What I mean by that is, like, let's say I'm sitting down right now, and if I feel the empty space around me, I can immediately be whole bodily present, but I don't have to create this artificial experience of like a solidified, like felt sense of the body through just breathing breathing in and I'm experiencing the entire body, and breathing out, experiencing the entire body. I don't have to go that far. I just feel the empty space around my body, and then have that empty space present to the void, and that'll be enough to generate radiance from the empty space. And what I would suggest is that some things I've tried is, rather than try to Mr. Gardner, he provides an analogy where the presence is pressing into the void. I wouldn't really use that term because, again, it's empty space you're talking about, so there's nothing to really press into. What I would say is that vacuum energy, that potential vacuum energy, is always present. If you look out in front of you, you'll see that this space, Anadi uses the term transcendent subjectivity or universal subjectivity, also known as I am. Right? There's a presence to that empty space. It's not just nothing. What you have to do is that as long as you have that whole body presence established, and then if you take that presence and you orient it towards the presence of the void itself, it'll automatically, quote unquote, shine, although not visually, but there will be an energetic pressure that starts to radiate within the void. You don't have to press into it. So if you're reading his article on what was his website, electricalspirituality.com, just keep that in mind. That those are some suggestions. Oh, another one is, like he said, concentrating your attention, not concentrating, but occasionally giving like quick glances towards your third eye area, just between and above the eyebrows right here. That does solidify your presence a little bit, but you don't want to like keep it there and then like maintain your presence like that the entire time. It's just you look at it for a couple seconds and the presence starts to solidify. And what he says is that the separation between mind and body, doing that, the separation between mind and body starts to dissolve and become one, which is what actually solidifies the presence. What else? Oh yeah, as for keeping, I can't really show you here, but keeping your hands on your knees, you don't really have to do that. For me, I find it more comfortable just to look down. Just keeping my hands like this, like the typical Buddhist meditation posture between my legs, I find that that's more than enough. The presence comes actually from the empty space within, around you, and above and bottom. As long as you're experiencing the entire body when you're present to the void, then that should generate enough energy. That's the main part. The extra stuff he says, like gazing into the void, like, again, you don't have to gaze far out into the void. You just need to be present to the subjectivity, the presence of empty space. What else? Oh yeah, another thing is that the way you'll know whether you're generating enough energy is, again, that pressure at the actual solid part at the top of your skull, the crown chakra. And if Amrita Nadi is really flowing down, you'll feel this part actually open up to the upper chakras above. And you'll feel it, like when Amrita Nadi is flowing, is that there's literally an opening above your head. And there's like you won't see anything, but there's like this sort of energy above your head, and then it's trickling down. You won't feel it too much in the neck. For me, it's more in the chest, the flow in the chest towards the heart on the right. I have not cut the heart knot yet, so I don't know how I'll do that, but I'll just have to keep experimenting, keep trying. I do suspect that it's probably a leakage in my presence, that I need to make it even more solid, keep my orientation towards the void constant and not retracting. Gardner says that when the mind starts to wander, when you latch upon a distracting thought, that your orientation, you're turning towards the void using the presence, starts to falter. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what I need to work on. So after L. Ron Gardner's plugged-in presence is the third way of meditation that I've been practicing, which is Anadi's teaching. So the teaching of Anadi, as you guys may know, revolves around pure subjectivity. This is something I mentioned in my spiritual vlog, and it's comprised of a number of centers or openings within the physical body. One is behind the head, behind the actual physical head, which opens to pure consciousness. The second is just right below the belly button, which is called pure being or pure me of being. And then there's one final one at the heart, not the spiritual heart on the right in plugged in presence, but the heart in the center, or the heart chakra, the Anahata chakra. And now these, and there's also one last center of subjectivity, which is between the eyebrows, and it's comprised of everywhere between the eyebrows, the forehead, and the cheekbones, which is called the 4 centers of essential me, which I'll break down later on. Anyways, so his whole teaching is about uniting our personal subjectivity with transcendent subjectivity, and the way you do this is through a physical process of surrendering your personal felt sense of self into that space beyond, sort of like plugged in presence, except you're not being present to the void or empty space, but you're actually moving your sense of self into it. So some progress that I've made with this, I've actually been practicing this for the longest time, even before Anapana, plugged in presence, or the last method I'll be mentioning, which is the Tranquil Wisdom Insight method. I've been practicing this for quite a while, although recently, because of those other methods that I've been trying, I haven't been able to really develop my understanding in Anadi's teaching. But basically, I haven't really transcended the point where I can just embody pure subjectivity like right off the bat. This is something that Anadi calls the elementary stage, where you have to consciously surrender and abide in that space in order to embody your true self. Whereas for advanced students and masters like himself, you can just completely let go of control and abide as the self in pure consciousness, being, or heart. And he can do that simultaneously within all of the centers. One thing I want to talk about with this teaching is I don't want to get into much of the technical details of it. Like, for example, what is the difference between pure attention, which is the active process, the active flow of attention, of subjective attentions that surrenders into that space, the void, whether that may be consciousness, being, or heart, and bare attention, which is the actual felt sense of subjectivity, or your sense of self. Rather than that, I want to talk about how this teaching is aimed at something called the crossing of the personality threshold. So the personality threshold is basically the line that delineates the crossing from your ordinary psychological self, or your self-image, with all the attachments that you have to it. This is exactly the same as Gary Weber's self-referential internal narrative, or default mode network activity. Anadi calls this the personality, which doesn't have to be eliminated, but it has to be, the weight of personality has to be reduced, and has to be, like, for example, let's say that your sense of self is comprised of your personality on the one hand, and your true non-psychological sense of self on the other hand, which is embodied through these various centers: consciousness, being, heart, and essential me. So for people who haven't crossed the personality threshold, they're 100% dominated by personality, and even then they have no control over it, because he says that you can't, one of the centers, he says, in essential me, the sense of self just right between your eyebrows and this entire region, is the person. Now the person is located just a little bit, just right in the center of the forehead and a little bit in front. And that's basically where you experience the thinker, the subject behind your thoughts. It's not the sense of self that you see as the witness or looking out at the world, but rather it's the self. It's the sense of self that is creating your thoughts and is causing you to think. And what he says is that in ordinary, for the average person, they can't separate the thinker from thoughts, so they have an incessant default mode network that's running. Now, in my experience, I still haven't really crossed the personality threshold, although I have gained a deeper appreciation for my pure subjectivity. Even then, one of the things I think that's holding me back is my love for, as you guys may know, I'm a huge fan of like superheroes and whatnot, and that kind of pop culture, those kinds of pop cultural influences are kind of keeping me stuck in this idea of being a good person and receiving validation from that. Although with Anapana, my inner values have changed to where I no longer feel that the validation you gain from being a good person or putting on a show of being a quote-unquote hero is seen as something worthwhile that will lead to true, genuine love for others and reality as a whole. But at the same time, even though my inner values have changed, that self-referential activity is still happening. And I find myself, because I don't practice his method too often, whereas I used to a lot, right now I'm in an experimentation phase, and my practice has been scattered all over. I haven't been really able to cultivate one path in much depth. I find that this self-referential activity is starting to come back, and I'm kind of indulging in those personality-related, activities like watching TV shows or whatnot a lot more, and that has a lot of drawbacks with regards to the spiritual path, even if they can be inspiring and you can take good life lessons from them. Anyways, but I think that, a way to counteract this, if you're a student of Anadi, is you really need to deepen your sense of pure subjectivity in sitting meditation. And for me, in my experience, what I felt is at the moment I truly feel an abiding connection to consciousness, being your heart. My sense of self beyond the mind deepens, and there's this sense of inner love and contentment where the presence of my felt sense of self alone can satisfy me. I don't need anything in the external world. You don't really need friendships or worldly activities, or you don't have to do anything. You can just abide as the feeling of self. Some argue that little sense of self, the fact that I exist, in Buddhism they say that little sense of self is actually born of conceit. Not even the sense of pride where like, oh, I'm better than other people, but even the sense that the felt physical sense that I exist, that is born out of conceit. And it's a very subtle form of pride that only arahats, the highest level of enlightened people, can transcend. But Anadi, his whole teaching is centered around disagreeing with this notion that no, our sense of self is the only path to salvation, that the denial of the ego or the self altogether is a spiritual error. But anyways, with this teaching, I'm still trying to find ways to integrate it with human activity, but Anadi does warn about this in thinking, seeing that, most people see the spiritual path as a place to fix yourself and then return to worldly life, where worldly life takes ordinary human life and its constructs takes precedence over the spiritual life, when it's actually the other way around. 80% of your life should be lived internally, and then human life and its constructs and activities are only a place, a playing ground to express those inner spiritual values, not in an intellectual sense, but being embodied through those centers of subjectivity, consciousness, being, heart, essential me. This is these four main centers are a huge oversimplification because his teaching is comprised of, if you look at his map of awakening, there's actually many centers beyond that where, consciousness and being intersect, where there's horizontal surrender, which is surrendering this way, and vertical surrender, which is surrendering into the absolute. I won't go too much into that. Maybe in the future, once I have gained proficiency along his path, I'll do a video separately for Anadi's teaching. But overall, yeah, at this point, I'm still trying to find ways to cross the personality threshold. I may have to reduce my consumption of like superhero TV shows and whatnot, which internally I've been noticing that, I do feel this inner resistance to not indulging in it. On the one hand, they are, you can say that, overconsumption of those things is plainly a waste of time. I mean, you could be using your time in a more productive way, but at the same time, it's also, okay, without that sensory stimulation, without the, without all the action, the drama, the music, the soundtrack, the glory, the externalized visions of friendship and all these themes, without that dramatic play, without taking in all that, would you still see the beauty of life? Would you still be able to embody the values of these superheroes in real life if you didn't have that daily stimulation from TV shows, if you weren't as entertained? And that's a hard question to tackle, especially because, I can say to myself that, I do value spiritual life more than indulgence, where I actually do feel these values on an inner level. But in practice, when the temptation actually comes, when you do have to make that choice, Leo Gura from Actualized.org, he talks a lot about self-deception, where we think that, the corruption, evil, and devilry is out there, when no, in reality, it's all of it is in here. We have to fix the devilry within ourselves, the self-deception and egoic attachments within ourselves, in order to fix all the corruption that is out there. And even in Buddhism, there was a Thai Arahat, Ajahn Mahabua. He's mentioned that the root of ignorance, the true avijja is the root name for ignorance, Avijja. It's not what people think it is. It's not just Dilakkhana. It even goes beyond the Dilakkhana. It's before the final stage of enlightenment, before the final surrender. It appears as a radiant, boundless light, and people spiritual seekers get caught up in that. They think because it embodies all the values we love, everything that's heroic and beautiful about life, we think that it is represented by that light. But, even the attachment to all that has to be transcended in order for us to become love. So much of our life is centered around the experience of love. Whenever we talk about love, we think, I want to experience love. I want love from others. I want to feel entertained by the media or these shows and movies, and that gives me the experience of joy and beauty. But we don't want to become it. Adida tells us, the root of egoti itself, self-contraction, as I mentioned in Plugged In Presence. The root of that is the unwillingness to be love. And it is a big dilemma. Right now, sometimes as I'm thinking about that question, like whenever I indulge in TV, these kinds of entertainments, there is an inner struggle that happens. Like I have a lot of something I probably haven't mentioned in this video is I've been getting a lot of intrusive thoughts lately, sort of like OCD-like symptoms, where whenever I do these things, there's this inner conflict where there's these unwanted, quote unquote evil thoughts. It's like, oh, the spiritual path is, the spiritual path is causing you, is actually hatred against these things. Is that, spiritual path is keeping you from seeing the beauty of these entertainments, when that's not true. The spiritual path is a medium for love, which is also embodied in these entertainments, but ultimately it includes and transcends it. It's not spirituality, it's not exclusionary. Ken Wilber, with his integral paradigm, has said integrate and transcend. It's ultimately what we're supposed to do, but the question is how. And I think Anadi's path of pure subjectivity, if you really get into it on a deep level, and if you become whole on a human level, if you become whole on a human level, not from using the spiritual path as a panacea, as a quick fix, but living your life from pure subjectivity, then you can really become that love, while also seeing that love in everything that you experience and, appreciate in life, whether that be entertainment or friendships or external, like worldly activities. It doesn't matter, but all of it has to be embodied. And his path is one of the most refined, nuanced ways to do that. It really, if you look at, I suggest that if you go to his website, first check out the glossary, the basic glossary of the terms of Anadi's teaching, because that really, really clarifies a lot of the biomechanics behind enlightenment that other teachings don't talk about, including Ramana Maharshi's teachings and Adi Das and L. Ron Gardner's teachings. Don't talk about this stuff. He is one of a kind. Yeah. So that's all I have to say about Anadi's path of pure subjectivity. Okay, so before we move on, I just wanted to add in a quick little clip here relating to Anadi's pure subjectivity. I've been thinking lately about this idea of not only crossing the personality threshold, but also our idea of being a good person in society, and a lot of the errors and, errors and condemnation that can result in not only, can we fall for the validation that we receive from being a good person and being admired by all others, but also being demonized, the negative consequences of being demonized by others. The Joker movie recently came out. I haven't seen it, but the whole premise behind it is that the character Arthur Fleck, he gets bullied and trampled on by society, neglected, and that is the very thing that turns him into the Joker and pushes him towards insanity. And I think that, I've mentioned my love for superheroes before, so that goes to show that spirituality, one of the most important roles that it plays is separating, your love for your identity, the love that is inherent in your identity, from your dependency or your attachment towards it. And I just want to say that I've been thinking about one of the consequences behind this societal expectation of being a good person. And if you're not a good person, let's say you've committed an irredeemable crime like murder or rape or whatever, and that'll be on your mark, on your past for the rest of your life. That's a permanent stain on your character. And we have this culture of atoning for our sins, and then somehow if we can become a good person again, that'll make things right. But I just want to say that this will be a controversial idea, but we have to divorce our ideas of justice from our sense of identity. That has to be a revolutionary change in our culture, on every level, even in our education systems, the way we teach ideas about morality, and all the way up to university level curriculums about philosophy and social justice, about divorcing justice from identity. That's going to be a big step, and it can't just be intellectual. We need these metaphysical, biomechanical processes to really make it happen, like Anadi's teaching, or L. Ron Gardner's, or laws Anapana, or whatever they may be. But this idea of rehabilitation as well, rather than getting criminals to become better by reinforcing the expectation of a good person or being a good person. What we should move them towards is being able to appreciate the act of goodness, and moving towards that, like I said, that internal sense of love, rather than the desire to experience love from the outside. And I think that one of the loveliest qualities, excuse the pun, but one of the greatest qualities of being human, I think, is being able to love without, to love not necessarily without expectation, but to make the will to love, the choice to love beyond conditionality, where, if I receive this, only if I get what I want will I love. But even unconditional isn't necessarily the right word, because it's not blind. Like if you get tortured, obviously you're going to try your best to find a way out, but it's the word I'm looking for. It's rather than a conditional dynamic, it's where you appreciate, like I said, the love that you've received from external activities and objects, and then you use that love to transcend your need for being a good person. And that dynamic, as wordy as that sounds, as hard as it is to explain at the present moment, I haven't really refined that idea, but yeah, that really just reflecting on our justice system and our whole overall culture of expectation, even the way we raise children, that has to, like, even the way, parents reward children, oh, you're such a good little boy or good little girl, or you're a bad boy or a bad girl, that kind of rhetoric as well has to be really, really, you have to take a really hard look. Is that what you want your children to grow up with? Is that what you want your children to internalize? Yeah, just overall, the idea of being a good person is something that it doesn't hold any long-term value, Like, well, then you might ask, okay, so why do you love superheroes? You love them because they're good people. Well, on the one hand, it kind of, the deeper answer is that, no, it's the will to love, and the will to do what's right, no matter how difficult, or how evil, or how stained their past is. There's a lot of superhero characters that have an imperfect past, that have severe character flaws, like, I don't know, Cloak and Dagger is a less severe depiction of that, but hell, how about the Punisher? Something like that, and they still have that capacity to love, no matter, even if it's quote unquote brutal. Okay, in that respect, the Punisher isn't a great representation of love, but it's all, he does have his own moral code, and that, I think that, with human ideals, I am also planning to start a TV series sometime in the future around these themes. And one theme I'm definitely going to do is the sense of heroism beyond the sense of being a good person. What is that theme, and what are the implications for that in society? Yeah. From a biomechanical spiritual understanding, how is that represented? And how can we redefine the superhero genre from that? That's something I want to explore. But yeah, I just wanted to add my reflections on that in this segment. Okay, so the last meditation I want to share with you guys is Bhante Vimalaramsi's Tranquil Wisdom Insight Meditation, right? He also calls this the 6 R's, or loving kindness meditation, i.e. Metta meditation. So to summarize his practice, the 6 R's are recognize, release, relax, re-smile, return, and repeat. So when he says recognize, how the practice goes is, first, before you do any of the 6 R's, you focus on an object of meditation. For him, rather than doing the focused breathing like conventional Theravada Vipassana, where you focus on the breath at the tip of the nostrils or the belly or whatever, he just says for Anapana, he still interprets Anapana as conventional breath meditation. He just says you just understand your breathing process, whether you're breathing in long or breathing in short. You don't focus on any particular area. But what he likes to do is he likes to use the object of meditation as metta, or loving kindness. That way, because I think that really goes to show that enlightenment is developing your capacity to love reality and to love others, right? And that's what metta is, loving kindness. That if there are any blockages or residual attachments and aversions that are keeping you, barring you from fully expressing this love, then they will show up when you're trying to do loving kindness meditation. You'll feel your body contract, and you'll start feeling having these distracting thoughts in your mind. And this is where you can use Law's interpretation of Anapana, or do what Bhante Vimalaramsi recommends, which is recognize the distraction from your object of meditation, which is loving kindness, distracting thought which has arisen, pulling you away from from loving kindness. Just recognize that the thought has arisen. There's nothing to it. Recognize and then release. Release is simple. You just let go of whatever object or experience or concept or attachment you're getting stuck over. Like to really understand this meditation, you have to look into the Buddhist concept of dependent origination, or paticca samuppada. Paticca samuppada is dependent origination, where okay, let me spell this correctly. P-A-T-I-C-A. Is it C-A or C-C-A? P-A-T-I-C-C-A, paticca, and then S-A-M-U-P-A-D-D-A. Yeah, paticca samuppada, or dependent origination. So anyways, one of the main steps in dependent origination is upadana. Upadana is U-P-A-D-A-N-A, is clinging. Clinging arises, according to Bhante Vimalaramsi, as the incessant stories that go on in your mind of why you like or don't like something. And they're the stories of, why I should let go of it, and how you beat yourself up when you can't let go of it, and what the thing means to you, and all these thoughts about. It's basically, as Gary Weber puts it, the self-referential internal narrative, or SRN, the incessant stream of self-referential thoughts that you can't control. Or as Anadi puts it, your subconscious mind. So anyways, you let go of whatever thought that you're being stuck with, and immediately sorry, 1 second. Okay, anyway, so immediately what you'll feel is, as you let the moment you let go of the object of distraction, which is the thought, the clinging thought, there will be an opening in your mind, an expansion. And that moment will show you will give you an insight into the clear, sharp nature of the mind when it is free of attachment. That's not the end of it. Because right after you release the thought, you have to relax the residual physical and mental tension that is remaining within your headspace. Not only within your headspace, but also in your entire body, mainly in the solar plexus, as I've already mentioned. Because how it works is that the way he explains it is that the brain, the left and right hemispheres, have this membrane called the meninges wrapping all around them. And whenever you have a distracting thought, upadana, what the brain does is it contracts. There's a lot of similarities here. Notice that, Adida and Ramana Maharshi have said that the heart on the right, the spiritual heart, the seat of consciousness, again, there's substance dualism, consciousness separate from matter, is contracting. Whereas here, there isn't necessarily, at first glance, substance dualism, although there actually is, because Buddhism and rebirth. Right? Again, I won't go into that, but the meninges, so dependent origination is usually, the reason why I bring up substance dualism is dependent origination is usually seen as the cycle that keeps souls separate from matter, stuck in the cycle in samsara, the eons of lifetime after lifetime of rebirth. Whereas here, dependent origination is seen as a moment-to-moment process where the brain is contracting upon a thought form. Right? So the meninges, whenever you have a distracting thought, upadana, it contracts. And what you're doing with the relaxing process is you're releasing that tension in the brain. So the brain starts, rather than feeling tense and squished, starts to release a little bit. And the moment you relax, you'll feel again another opening. But this opening, what I felt, is very different from the initial one. The initial one is not that major. You release distracting thought. But the moment you release the distracting thought, in between the step of release and relax, you have to act quick. You release the distracting thought. If you don't relax the meninges, the tightness in your head, right after that, you can take however long you want with the relaxed step. I find that it's better even if you take like 3 or 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, just slowly relaxing. But you have to relax right after the release. The reason why is that if you don't, another distracting thought will appear in your head, most likely, unless you've done the twin meditation for over an hour or however long it takes to get your mind to calm down. But if you don't relax it immediately after the release step, another distracting thought will arise in your head, and guess what that'll do? Right, that'll create another separate contraction of the brain, which you'll have to release, which you'll have to relax as well. So to get onto it, you release the thought, and then right after that you relax the brain, however long you want to take on that. And then once it fully relaxes, there'll really be a significant opening of the mind, where not only will your mind become more expansive and sharp, and these kinds of states are often called jhanas, or absorptive states. Absorption states, where jhanas are spelled Jhanas, jhanas. And in this step, right after the moment of relaxation, there's a sense of joy and elated happiness, which kind of corresponds to, if I'm correct, the first and second jhanas. It arises not from the flow of clear light energies Anadi Teaching does. Though if you relax the headspace, I find that if you've done a plugged-in presence practice prior to that you'll actually increase the flow of Anadi Teaching. So again, you can use those practices together. But in this case, it's more of a physical sensation of joy that comes from, that arises from the solar plexus and the heart. It's kind of coming from. And it's not only up, but there's no set location to it. So sometimes you may feel it rising up from the solar plexus and the heart, and then usually what you feel is it's in the head space itself. You'll feel that sense of joy. Okay. You'll feel that sense of joy, and then what you have to do is, the next step is re-smile. So re-smile, what he's basically saying is, I'll demonstrate to you a little bit. I have a distracting thought, release it, and right after I release it, so that moment where my eyes kind of blinked for a moment, that was the moment where the mind expanded and then the sense of joy sort of filled the headspace. It didn't come up in here because it wasn't a full body relaxation, but that sense of joy is when you have to actually smile, not only using the corners of the mouth, but smile in the mind itself. So you relax. As soon as the joy bubbles up from below or in the head, you lift up the corners of the mouth and you really smile as though you're giving an actual smile. It's not just you're not doing that. You're not giving a fake smile. You're actually trying to be happy and feel as much joy as you can. And after that, the step after re-smile is return. Return what? If you're doing Anapana, conventional Theravada Anapana, you might return to the breath. If it's Lao's Anapanasati, then you might return to the Dilakkhana, contemplating the good and the bad of attractions and aversions. Or, as Bhante Vimalaramsi instructs, you will immediately return to loving kindness. What this is doing is, if you notice, what this is doing is it is using the joy that has bubbled up in the head and the body, using that joy to expand your capacity to love, to radiate love, to radiate loving kindness. And eventually, as you keep doing that, you go through the 6 R's, that love just grows and grows and grows and grows and grows until eventually all of your attachments are unwired. Not how, just give you an idea of how deep this goes. So the first few jhanas, absorption states, are the experiences of joy and rapture. But then after that, like the third and fourth jhanas are going slowly into calmness and equanimity, where it's actually neutral sensation. You don't feel any sense of joy at all. It's just calmness, pure calmness. And then after the 4 jhanas, some people call it the formless attainments. After that, where it's like infinite space, infinite consciousness, neither perception nor non-perception, and then the total and then what is it? Oh yeah, neither perception or non-perception. And then one could say that after you have transcended all 8 jhanas is the experience of Nibbana, which is the complete cessation of attraction, the complete cessation of egoic attachments through, if you're coming from L. Ron Gardner's perspective, is the complete untying of the heart knot and the complete flow of radiant being energy into the heart, or as the conventional Theravada interpretation goes, the complete cessation of perception, consciousness, space, and time. So, again, there's also a lot of diverging interpretations on what nirvana or nibbana is in enlightenment. But the point is that the commonalities to all these meditation practices is that end goal is what allows you to finally let go of the boundaries, the limitations to your capacity to radiate love and kindness, and to see all of reality and to affirm all of reality in a positive light. And yeah, I mean, the 6 R's have been extremely effective, but especially because I can now feel the transitions between like release and relax. Like for when I was doing the practice wrong, I thought that the release step was like releasing the contraction, the tight fist in the mind, and then relaxing the residue, whereas it's not the case. It's you release the distracting thought. Because what I found is that if you try to release the contraction without relaxing it, without letting go of the thought, it won't budge. And then it may actually even tighten up even more. So yeah, that really stalled my practice. But yeah, so like the important thing is you have to do the 6 R's correctly. If you don't understand it, go and watch Bhante Vimaramsi's video. But yeah, one takeaway that I've had with the Tranquil Wisdom Insight Meditation is feeling the transition from recognizing to releasing, which is fast. As soon as you recognize the distraction, instantly release it. Instantly let go of it. It's very simple. The thought will vanish. And then the transition from letting go to the tension is also very fast. As soon as you let go, the tension is apparent. It is the transition between release and relax is a little bit longer than the transition between recognize and release. I'll add that because you do have to get a sense of where the tension is. Is it up here? Is it behind the head, as in John Dixon talks about the reptilian brainstem? Is it inside? You do have to get a good grasp of that, but that's relatively quick. Once you do the practice, you'll know how to locate the tension and relax it. But then, like I said, the relax step you can take however long you want on it, because once you're in the process of relaxing, the distracting thoughts really won't show up in your mind, so you're fine with that. And then the steps after relax, which comes re-smile and return, those you can take as long as you want. Relax. Once you shift into the re-smile step, once the tension is completely dissolved, you do have to relax all the way. It can't be, it can be part way, but I believe that it's not, in my experience, it's not as effective as you relax the tension all the way until poof, it dissolves. There is a significant opening where the joy bubbles up from the body and the mind. And on the re-smile step, what I find is helpful is that you can magnify the sense of joy as much as you can. It doesn't just have to be a little bit, because the more joy you have, again, the more loving kindness you can radiate. So really relish in that sense of joy. Bhante also addresses that, isn't that essential attachment? But, he says step by step. If you're in the initial jhanas of rapture, that the words for that are piti, sukha. Sukha is happiness. Piti is the sense of joy or inner elatedness or inner satisfaction, right? And you can magnify as however much you want, because that's, without being sensually attached to it. You radiate as much as possible, and then after that, between the re-smile and the return step, the return to loving kindness, there's no actual opening, expansion, or shift that happens into loving kindness, like opening the heart chakra. None of that happens. It's loving kindness is once you have enough joy, whenever you're ready, you just choose to spread loving kindness to others, to reality. To see loving kindness is, for me personally, is not only wishing other people well, but seeing the positivity of life and reality and creation itself, elevating your ability to affirm existence as it is, and affirm other people as the way they are. And that includes impermanence, suffering, no self, conventionally interpreted, or Law's interpretation of the Dilakkhana. What was I going to say? Oh yeah. Another thing that's really helpful, I haven't experimented with this too much, is on the return step, rather than using conventional metta meditation, where metta bhavana is loving kindness. What you can do is you can use Law's version of metta bhavana, which is a little bit more esoteric, where you're not just wishing well on others, you're wishing that all beings in the 31 realms see the nature of anicca, dukkha, anatta. So that's one point. I wish that all beings in the 31 realms see the nature of anicca, dukkha, anatta. The second point is that I wish the second point to metta bhavana, what he calls ariya metta bhavana, or the noble version of noble loving kindness, versus anariya metta bhavana. Anariya metta bhavana is ordinary loving kindness. So Bhante Vimalamsi's version, you could see it as ordinary loving kindness, and then Law's interpretation of loving kindness. Ariya Metta Bhavana is noble loving kindness, or what Buddha supposedly actually taught. Right? So the first step to Ariya Metta Bhavana is, it's spelled A-R-I-Y-A, Ariya. Metta is M-E-T-T-A. Bhavana is B-H-A-V-A-N-A. Ariya Metta Bhavana is you radiate loving kindness, as in, I wish all beings in the 31 realms would see the nature of 3 characteristics, anicca, dukkha, anatta. Then, from seeing this, I wish that all beings attain the 4 stages of Buddhist enlightenment, which is Sotapanna, Sagadagami, Anagami, and Arhat. I wish that they become Sotapannas, Sagadagamis, Anagamis, and Arhats. And after that, am I missing a step? Oh yeah. So one is, I wish that they see the Tilakkhana. I wish that they attain the 4 stages of enlightenment. Yeah, those 2 parts are pretty much what is needed for Ariya Metta Bhavana. And then of course you can add into that, like, I wish that they're safe or whatever. Oh yeah. Another step you can add into that is, I wish that the people who have gotten me to where I am today, which is, the people who are most worthy of your gratitude and thanks, which are the noble persons, like the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, obviously. Another one is your parents and your teachers, right? So you can wish the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, your parents and your teachers and your close friends or your loved ones, that they see the 3 marks of existence and that they attain the 4 stages of enlightenment. And you can also add into that conventional loving kindness of wishing them well, that protecting them from harm, that having their wishes come true, whether worldly or non-worldly wishes. So yeah, anyways, that has been a really, I believe is a really good, pretty much a good, accurate overview of what my meditation practice has been like during the semester. I've gained a more in-depth, detailed understanding of the modifications in each step of the meditation process that I have to do with Anapana, plugged in presence, and the twin method, or Tranquil Wisdom Insight Meditation. Also, you can call it the 6 R's. So Anapana, plugged in presence, and the 6 R's. That's been my go-to arsenal, and which I will be introducing and teaching to students at Human Ideals. To any USC students that are watching this, I will be bringing up Human Ideals as sort of a discussion starter at one of the Interfaith Council meetings. I've been talking with Nick Robleski, who's in charge of the Interfaith Council group, and he's offered to reserve a day where we can talk about, I can start off the conversation by saying, like, we usually start off our weekly meetings through questions like, what role has religion played in your life? And then we follow up with questions like, is the way you perceive religion different from the ideals and practices that were imposed upon you or transferred to you by your parents or your culture? And then we also talk about other topics like, how do you think your personal religion treats issues like LGBTQ rights, as opposed to the way you actually perceive this issue? And there's a lot of areas that the Interfaith Council tries to bridge from the perspective of religion. But anyways, what I'm planning to do is, to bring up that conversation topic of, you know, what does meditation, or what does inner development, or what does life purpose mean to you, and then how has your religion or personal upbringing, how has your personal religion or cultural upbringing taught you to perceive issues of existence and suffering and life purpose. And another question I could raise is, how has that been translated into an inner practice for you, a path of inner purification or development? And then I could lead a segue into human ideals and what I'm planning to do. But then at that point, you know, there'd be a Q&A session about, okay, what do you guys want to see out of a group like this? What do you guys want human ideals to be? Because again, I have the premise of human ideals is, you know, to go beyond anti-life, anti-worldliness, escapism, propounded by most religions, and often Eastern Enlightenment religions as well. But you know, I don't want to forcefully impose that philosophy on the students. I want students to offer some input as well. Like, what do they want the premise of human ideals to be, and how can that be fit into the philosophy that's already there, and then hopefully create something new, rather than being one or the other. We could say, can we combine these two areas of focus and then really expand the scope of what human ideals is, that it reflects the beliefs and values of everyone involved. That's what I want it to be. And you know, just some last minute thoughts on human ideals is that diversity in the overall purpose of human ideals also goes into the range of views that we accept in students. Like, it's not just, you know, bipartisan, you know, third way thinkers. There can be, you know, really left leaning or really right leaning liberals or conservatives. Like, it doesn't matter. It's there may be radical feminists or moderates, or, you know, hell, there could be, like, okay, I wouldn't go so far as to say like white nationalists, but, you know, like very, you know, super conservative, like puritanical evangelical Christians. Hell, like, we could even have that. But my belief is that all of that will converge into that life affirming view that human ideals has, that third way thinking of beyond bipartisanship, and, you know, beyond aversion towards worldly life. All of these viewpoints can converge into that purpose, and that purpose can be reflected in the sorts of policy solutions that we implement in the number of issues we're going to be dealing with, like climate change and identity politics, to name a few. But anyways, I think that's it for my update video on what I've been doing with meditation. Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the comments down below, what types of meditation practices have you been taking on lately, and how has that influenced your understanding of the spiritual path, and what are you planning to do? The big question is, what are you planning to do with those insights, the insights that you've gained through meditation, in your daily life, or in your overall life, or in your whole life purpose, or your mission for social change? What are you guys doing with those insights? Does it have any political relevance, or even on, you know, even within your own family, has it positively affected your relationships with others? Yeah, so one is, just let me know, and briefly mention in the comments, what insights have you gained from meditation recently? What practices have you been taking, and how has that affected your life and your sense of purpose and direction? Yeah, anyways, and I will catch you guys in the next video, which I'll probably make, you know, within a couple weeks. I won't be going for over a month this time. I'll promise. It will be, you know, 2 weeks tops before I make another video. But once I I will make sure to post a video on the session I do with the Interfaith Council, which I'm super excited for. If I do meet up with the Citizens Climate Lobby tomorrow, I will also post a video with that, because that'll be really interesting. It'll be my first time in the group. So yeah, you can look forward to that. Anyways, I'll catch you guys in the next video.